in various intersectionalities of society. I'm happy to also see our male colleagues in the room because this conversation needs to be had with exactly everybody. So to my right, the colleague is Mariela from the ILC, and she is in charge of global land and data monitoring. She's part of the team on global land and data monitoring, which is great. She will tell us more about the work that she does and the tools they are using and the challenges they have experienced and other matters that relate to the indicators. So on our other, on my right also is our other colleague from the Women Caucus, Hernandez Yesenia, and she will also tell us from her own perspective how she perceives the traditional knowledge indicators and how we should have a more gender responsive indicators and how we should have more appropriate ways of engaging with traditional indicators. We also have Ruth, who is also part of the IPLC community and also part of the Women Caucus as part of the advisory board. And she will also give us her perspective, lots of experience there as well. And Christina Egenta from WWF, part of the NGO community, and also part of the Women Caucus. So with this team, I think we have done justice in terms of bringing together expertise. Lastly, my name is Cecilia Gidaiga. I'm from Kenya and I'm part of the Women Caucus. And here I will be helped to facilitate the conversation. As you can see, the Women Caucus has representatives from across the globe, so that makes us very happy and very proud. We also have our communications colleague, Deepika, and she will be recording our conversation using graphics, which is going to be interesting for us to make a graphical impression of what we foresee and what we see. So the objectives of the meeting, as we had advertised, is on measuring what matters to us. So how do we improve traditional knowledge indicators through a gender lens? And amongst the objectives will be to examine the current traditional knowledge indicators and discuss strategies for integrating gender responsive components to ensure that the contributions of women and girls are effectively measured and valued. We also want to explore the importance of gender disaggregated data collection and the development of gender indicators culturally appropriate to Indigenous women and girls in line with the Gender Plan of Action. We also want to strengthen the evidence base and understanding of the gender impacts of implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, while recognizing the central role of all women and girls, especially those from Indigenous peoples and local communities, including the insights from traditional knowledge. And how best to start that conversation, if not to ask the Indigenous woman herself to take us through the background and kick off this conversation.
Hi, it's good to be here and good to have you with us. We hope our sharing will inspire and impact you. I am a local representative. I work with groups at the local level. So this topic, measuring what matters to who? We the people at the local level, NGO stakeholders, the government. Who does this directive go to? So from the local community perspective, I would say we the people on the ground should be educated and understand about these global issues. Currently, working with people on the ground, they are concerned with bread and butter issues. They're concerned with issues that affect them day-to-day, water, sanitation, their food supply. Right now, in our country, prices are just going up like crazy. That's what the people at the local level daily concerns about. But for now, to bring them into the conversation of biodiversity issues, the global biodiversity framework, somebody has to carry that information to them. Who does it? In my country, the government will put a release out about the GBF on national TV, national radio. But actually going down to the communities, meeting them on their level, providing this information does not take place. So it takes committed groups, NGOs, to actually meet with these groups at that time. That is what I would consider as effective inclusion and participation. You have to meet them on their time. You can't just call a national consultation and expect them to leave their villages to come to the city. No, we need to meet with them at their level and at a time that suits them. So the GBF, the indicators, the monitoring, who is doing the tracking? Yes, the groups are involved in community conservation. They're dealing with, seed banks. They're dealing with things that conserve biodiversity. They also are the greatest protectors of biodiversity, because in the communities, when they see something going wrong, if they see a tobacco clearing, they send out an appeal. Something is going on, because from their knowledge, they know we should not be cutting down the trees. So that's a red flag. So what they do, they send an email to one of us. Something is happening. And when we investigate, it may be an investor has been given some lands. He's going to build something. So, of course, we have to go to the higher authorities to ask what's going on. And if it wasn't for these people on the ground, I guess in some countries we call them the environmental defenders, we call them community stewards, we would not observe what's going on. So the education and the empowerment of the local groups are important to the GBF to measure what they're doing and how their local knowledge fits into the process. Sometimes they don't understand the big terms. So it's we who have the big understanding of the monitoring of the framework would have to translate it into a language, into a pattern, into a process that fits in with the global biodiversity framework. So the source of data for the GBF, where does it originate from? It should come from the people, right? They are on the ground doing the work. That's where the measuring of the indicator should start from, not from governments. Governments are in offices, reading documents. It's the people on the ground doing the work. So the source of data must start with the people. So it means we have to start building these connections with the local people and groups. To many of us, it's hard work, because it means that you may have to spend your weekend in a community. It might be an evening when the groups work, because a lot of the work is voluntarily. So they tend to meet after hours, weekends. So are we willing to go the extra mile? To meet the GBF, to include everybody, it means going the extra mile, shifting some of your time schedules so that you can meet with these people and hear their stories. It's their stories that matter. It's their stories that's going to give you the evidence of what's really happening on the ground. So we talk about inclusion and participation. Effective. We need to put things in place that these human rights processes can be realized. If not, we're going to have implementation gaps. And anytime you leave the people at the bottom out, There's something in our projects, something in our policies that's missing. And if the people are not included, are they going to buy into it? We need local ownership of these processes. All these processes that we're talking about, we need the people to be a part of it. So we have to build up trust. We have to build up understanding. We have to build networks. And it's not hard to do, because when you start to work with these people, you realize they're going to help you in your own work. They have information that can help you. Look at the people as a human resource. And I'm telling you, these people, they're full of ambition. You might be surprised. Start working with them, start sharing with them, start including them in your processes, and you will see things starting to happen. And these indicators that we're talking about, we'll be able to monitor them. We'll be able to track them, because the very people is gonna provide the information, the case studies, the knowledge that we need. And we as women, we are important because our gender lens is very wide. We know the people in the communities, we know that those who are disabled, those with HIV, those that people don't want to include. We as women in the community, we embrace them, because even though they have, vulnerabilities, they still have ideas, they still have knowledge that can work. And so my message to you today here is, don't leave nobody out in your communities, in your work. Try to be open. Don't just send emails. Sometimes they don't even answer the emails. Try and make a personal visit, a face-to-face, connect with them, and you'll see things happening. That has been my experience, that face-to-face. And so I hope my little message will help you as you go back to your countries and begin to implement the GBF, the NB-SAPs. Try to do it in a localized situation where you can hear the voices of so many people. Thank you.
As always, thank you very much, Ruth Spencer. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, and your passion always comes through in these conversations. So we really appreciate that introduction by one of our women who is also IPLC. And we want to move over to our colleague from the ILC, Mariela, if you would kindly let us know what you have for us this afternoon. And yes, as Mariela prepares, we have heard from Ruth that we must not leave anyone behind. Traditional knowledge is always important for us. We know that, and that the sources of data must include the people who interact directly with nature, and that understanding and education is necessary for Indigenous peoples and local communities. And for us as women, we were concerned that the traditional knowledge indicators may have left out aspects that would be gender responsive. So we would like to hear more about how we make our frameworks more responsive to gender concerns. Thank you very much, Mariela.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. And thank you, Ruth, for setting the stage. So I will talk about data, or especially putting a gender lens on it. To me, I like to envision data always as the bones, or let's say the skeleton, which needs the stories, the experiences by target groups, how we call them, or local communities or Indigenous people, in order to give them more context, to give them more meat to the bones. Because data can often be interpreted only as numbers, or can be seen only as numbers. And we need these stories to make these numbers powerful. So within the framework of the CBD and the TK indicators, I thought that it would be nice to introduce to quickly give you the quickest run-through indicators I could possibly give to highlight 3 indicators that could fit the CBD framework and especially address one of the 4 targets of the TK indicators. You may be familiar with some of them. All of them are part of the SDG framework. The first one is the land tenure indicator, SDG indicator 1.4.2, which custodians are the UN Habitat and World Bank. This indicator means to measure the proportion of adult population with secure tenure rights, considering 2 aspects. The first one is what percentage of the population has legally recognized documentation over their land. And the second one, to which degree these populations feel secure in their rights. Currently, the current state of the data, you will see, and this is a recurring trend, is that the data is very limited. In fact, for this indicator, official data has only data for 34 countries available as of June 2021. And when we look into the gender disaggregation of the data, it's even less, summing up to 22 countries out of those 34. Zooming into the women lens, we can see, I will propose 2 indicators to you. One is 5A1 and the second is 5A2. The first one will look at the proportion of agricultural population, so similar to the other one, but that have rights over agricultural lands. And especially in this indicator, we want to focus on the second element, which is the share of women that have been recognized as owners of their land and have documentation to prove it. Here, the official data, you can see that for almost half of the countries that have data available, which again is a very small number, the proportion of men with ownership rights is at least twice of the women. And in fact, the proportion of women with landowners that are landowners falls usually below 50% in the 35 countries where data is available. A similar trend is also reflected in the last indicator, which looks at the proportion of women in the country where the, which looks at the legal framework of the country and sees to which degree this legal framework helps in advancing women in owning rights to land. And here the official data, also taken from FAO as a custodian, shows that approximately 48% of the countries indicate that there is a very low level of women that a very low protection of the legal framework for women, and only 52% indicates that this degree of protection is high within the legal framework. And this applies for a total of 77 countries. So again, the numbers are small in the official reporting. So what does this tell us? What does this mean to you or to us? Well, on one hand, we can clearly see that there is a persistent data gap when it comes to women's data on land. The reason as to why this could happen can be often causes of the national census, the way they operate, or the methodology that is applied by these larger frameworks. However, on the bright side, I would say, is that these are examples of indicators that do already exist, which methodologies have been legitimized and have been recognized also in international frameworks. So for us, this would mean that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We could start working on these indicators and adjust them to our needs in order to cover the elements that we want to highlight in our advocacy spaces. Here, and this is my last slide, the suggestion how we could do this is by using complementary data or additional data. For this example, I will highlight 2 different initiatives that do that, that can be directly linked to the work that is done for the 3 indicators I presented previously. So on one hand, we have Prindex, which is a data initiative that looks at the percentage of population with documentation and on land rights and how they perceive their tenure security to be. So you can see this is echoing already the first indicator. And for here, Prindex is a Gallup survey platform. So they do huge surveys. And in fact, they have data for over 140 countries, and doing an analysis on a global scale of their data, we can see that this data already indicates that 71% of women have documentation to prove their rights to land, and 72% of these women feel secure in their rights. The second initiative is Landex, which is the International Land Coalition's global land governance collection tool that puts people in the center of land governance. And here I'm addressing only 2 of the 33 indicators that they have. In total, they address 10 commitments, which go from Indigenous people to women, to local communities, and way more. But here I'm focusing only for the one on women land rights. And one is indicator 4B, which takes on the methodology from the SDG framework, asking again for the total number of individuals living on agricultural land, and which of those are women and have recognized documentation for their land. Throughout the 31 countries where data has been collected through Landex, data about this information has been available only for 16 countries. And the results show that on average, women living on agricultural land, only 25% of women living on agricultural land have ownership and documentation to their land. The last one is indicator 4A, which again will mirror what is needed for indicator 5A2. Below you see the list of proxies that are addressed to the questionnaire in the indicator. I will not go through all the proxies, but you can have a look at them there. And this data shows that for the 31 countries, data is available for 27. And from this data, we can see that 89% indicates that there are low or very low legal frameworks that support women, and only 11% of these legal frameworks indicate a strong or very good support system for women to advance in their rights. So all of this to say what? That we have already indicators that can be used. There exist recognized and legitimate indicators which we can build upon. And I think especially this kind of additional and complementary data can be particularly useful and very up to date, given the momentum that has been given by the UNSD and other initiatives to promote citizen-based data, meaning giving a space to Indigenous people, to local communities, to women to directly engage and reporting on their current situation. And I think this is a momentum we need really to take advantage of, also with the creation of new institutions such as the Global Land Observatory, which is based at FAO and is promoting accountability on these indicators and on the custodians of these indicators. And also proposing these alternative reporting methods. And I think this could be a great space for us to take advantage of. That's all. Thank you.
I also thank you immensely, Mariela, for that great presentation. And it's also great to hear that we already have mechanisms that we can already use on the ground. Like Mariela says, it may not necessarily be the need for us to reinvent the wheel when we can already use what we have and improve on it. Also great to tap into your experience and knowledge. And you know what I was thinking as she was talking is that if we have data like she says, then we have a good base to track and to monitor and to ensure everything is done right. And this also has a direct relation with monitoring how we implement the human rights approach in our implementation of the GBF, because data will provide the background that we need. Thank you very much, Mariela. I would invite now my colleague, Yesenia, to also speak to us about, and for those who are coming, Mariela is from the ILC, yeah. International Land Coalition. Yesenia is part of the Women Caucus. Ruth is part of the advisory board of the Women Caucus. Christina is part of the WWF and part of the Women Caucus. And I am also part of the advisory board of the Women Caucus. And with us, I apologize, we have Amelia, who is also the coordinator of the Women Caucus, a girl with a lot of responsibility, and Deepika for our communications, which is recording graphically. Thank you very much. Yesenia, in the interest of time, please.
Padiush, that means good day or good morning in my language, Zapotec. Thank you very much for inviting me. I will address some more qualitative data and, and information. You gave us the quantitative concerning information. Okay, I would like to start recalling that we are talking about diversity. Diversity of nature, cultures, diversity in the ways of living and thinking. And those the cultural and social diversity is based in our surrounding nature, in our surrounding social issues and items and social organizations. So the main challenge to how to design some indicators for in order to measure the improve or the or how to report to the international obligations, in this case, the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework, is to take into account this. We cannot to have a dress to fit to all the world, but we need to design or to have the material to be some material or some incomes, some input, sorry, incomes too, that could be necessarily to be adaptable to each circumstance. I remember the Cuba's delegate presentation when they say, okay, but we don't have indigenous languages. And it's true, we need to find some different ways to report the traditional knowledge and the women items indicators. Okay, second, the traditional knowledge embrace many things. It's not just knowledge, innovation, and practices, as HJ states, is talking about the cosmovision and values, and it's critical to survive and conserve our environments, cultures, and people. This is the importance and our contribution to health and revert biodiversity crisis. As the traditional knowledge is not recorded, it's sometimes we have an oral transmission, or we don't have a book or some documents or videos to transmit over traditional knowledge or to maintain or revitalize. It's complicated, include this in some more quantitative measures or techniques. However, the traditional knowledge outcome is visible for all of us. If we see the traditional knowledge as if best in the global assessment states, it's the way and how we maintain our lands, territories, and resources. We have the example, for instance, in the IPBEs, the platform, the International Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. They have been working very hard in recognize different knowledge systems as equal importance, but when they want to fit this traditional knowledge, Western science, and citizen science in a document is quite complicated. Traditional knowledge sometimes is a song, it's a history, and how we can fit in the journals rules and the very in a difficult rules. But we need to advance and go beyond in how to measure and to report the importance and the contribution of traditional knowledge. Specifically, one thing that parties could take into account is the traditional ecological knowledge, because traditional ecological knowledge is how we know the environment and how we are practicing activities and measures to protect them. On the other side, despite the remarkable and critical women contribution to in regard to the traditional knowledge and nature conservation, For example, I remember my grandmother walking with me when I was 6 or 7 years old in the forest. I learned a lot of her and which are the mushrooms, the edible mushrooms or poison, etc. And we have a lot of work done, and we have a lot of work to do. For instance, we have the domestic contribution from women to the economies, and we have a lot of contribution from women that are not recognized, are not visible in our societies or our domestic growth, etc. And we need to take into account this and to include those kind of matters. Both traditional knowledge and women contribution has not been usually measured and reported, but we need to start to do that. And with regard to the 4 indicators with language trends, and with a very specific gender lens, we need to recognize who is teaching us to talk, who teach us our first words. The women, our mothers, our grandmothers, sisters, and this is critical if we want to conserve and revitalize indigenous and local knowledges. And the second one, we need to working on empowering the women in transmission and conservation of knowledge, not just the domestic area. We need to empower them to be the teachers, to be the persons who are contributing in this in equal way with the men to the conservation of traditional knowledge. Very specifically, we need indicators for all the women that are our elders, and they are keeping and transmitting and teaching us traditional knowledge, the practices, the traditional medicine, etc. And another thing that we need to take into account is the percentage of indigenous women speaking indigenous languages or local languages. Because if a woman speaks an indigenous or local language, she is able to transmit and to teach to all of us, or more have more coverage. And how the women are contributing to revitalize indigenous and local languages. Sometimes women are concerned about the medicine, about the traditions, about take care of the family or the society, the world society in a local and indigenous context. And they are doing a great job, and we need to put this in the reports and to encourage to improve our work. With respect to land tenure, I have been stating that we are defending and protecting land, waters, territories, and resources, but sometimes we don't have the rights or the documents over them. We are dependent because we defend life, but if we have a right land tenure secured, we can improve our work. And we need to start with those data to know in where we are, and to promote more the improve of this right exercise. Women and youth in many communities have no rights. The youth is another group that we need to take into account, because in some contexts, and indigenous and local contexts, you need to wait to certain age or certain circumstances to have access to the right. And another thing, and the very, very challenging thing is how we, the indigenous peoples and some local communities, are thinking in a collective way, but how we promote the exercise of personal, of individual rights in a collective way. This it's critical for women and girls and youth, sometimes in many communities. How we can have a balance between our individual rights and the collective rights. And finally, then, with regard to the traditional occupation, Of course, IPBs also state that the best conserved of the lands where the biodiversity is decreasing in a low rates are under use, management, or owner of indigenous peoples and local communities. And in this regard, and the traditional occupation, what is the contribution of women to sustainable use? The mushroom, medicinal plants gatherers, or seeds keepers, as my sister mentioned. And the other thing is, how do we have the right to participate, to take part in the collective decisions? Because under our traditional occupation of lands, we take decisions in a collective way as indigenous peoples and local communities. And respecting to the traditional knowledge protection, the biopiracy is affecting in a important way or to women, especially with women, medicine women, the women that are take caring of the traditional knowledge that protect health and protect the traditional cultures and some specific and very specific knowledge. And sometimes the women don't have the protection inside the communities against a scientist or any external person that is going to ask her some data. And we need to include those kind of things and the value of traditional knowledge. First, we need to understand that traditional knowledge is not in the journal, but is doing a great contribution. Traditional knowledge is protecting land and is saving the world of the ecological collapse. And traditional knowledge must be integrate, not use, I don't like the word use, integrate into the other solutions, but we need first the free prior informed consent, and we need to be more ethical and moral in taking access in the access to the traditional knowledge. This is those are some important things that we must to think about, and it's important to include data by sex. Oh, sorry. And finally, I would like to invite to take in account the biocultural approach with gender perspective. Biocultural approach is a very appropriate method to think and to address the linkages between nature and culture and the need to affirmative actions for women and girls and the local communities and indigenous peoples, and engage with other international efforts, because one of the challenging the things are the time. We have very few time, and if we have some agencies or some efforts that have a lot of information or methods that could improve or contribute to our work in taking in designing and applying traditional knowledge indicators with a gender lens or perspective or approach, we can learn and we can take some methods and adapt them. And stewardship, that means thanks in my Zapotec, my language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hernandez. Really appreciate your extensive experience on matters of women and their rights and traditional knowledge. Being an Indigenous woman, that is understandable when we listen to you and we hear how critical women are to our ecosystems. Our traditional societies, our Indigenous peoples in local communities are incomplete without the whole society that comprises women and girls. And so we gently call on the support of all states and all organizations to support, as you have heard, with the mechanisms that you know about. We have some from the ILC, which we really appreciate, and also would like to hear also from the audience. So we will rush a bit with the time so that we can also hear from the audience and engage with you. I would also like to acknowledge, before I go over to you, Christina, the presence of the Secretary of Indigenous Environmental and Land Management at the Ministry of Indigenous peoples of Brazil. Thank you very much. And the critical role that you can play for us in this forum, and thank you for attending, is by telling us exactly how you engage with Indigenous peoples and local communities, and how the government can really have a conversation with us. Thank you very much. If you would kindly, I would like to invite you to come to the front, so that once Christina is done doing her presentation, you can address us. And I would also invite you can also please come and share with us later after Christina. Kindly.
Just sí, but first Christina.
As we change seats, Christina, please, once the minister said, okay, please proceed.
I feel under a lot of social, cultural, and time pressure.
No, we have time.
But, oh yeah, is that clear enough? But I'll be short. Because everything has been said, both beautiful and important by my co-panelists. So I thank you. And I want to start off by saying, yes, I work with WWF International at the moment, but I've also been kindly learning and on a learning journey with the Women Caucus for a few years now. And this has been a fantastic partnership also for a conservation organization to learn more about building a gender perspective into conservation work. So I acknowledge and thank the Women Caucus and Women for Biodiversity as the broader network of that. Coming back to the topic and this side event, I will only say that, of course, monitoring is very critical. And the monitoring is not just about measuring, it's not just about numbers, but it's about reporting and accountability. And I can see this accountability at multiple levels. Of course, parties have to report to the CBD about progress, but within the country, we report to governments, we report to our citizens. But broader, more holistically, we also have an accountability towards nature, because our livelihoods and well-being is based on nature and the environment. And also we have next generations that would like to inherit something before it's all gone. So I think we need to, it's important to consider when we speak about data collection, monitoring indicators, this broader, more holistic context. It's also that monitoring framework, coming back to the CBD and the GBF, it needs to, we would like to confirm a strong, also send a strong message around the need to have headline indicators. And I would also add meaningful. Mariella mentioned powerful. We can have both of them, indicators for all targets. So it's about quantity and quality, because the targets are actually quite good, ambitious, but also have different elements, all very important. As an organization, as a conservation organization, this has been our position, headline indicators for all targets. And this is especially, would say, true for cross-cutting targets like targets 22 and 23. And I would note that during SAPSTA 25, it was great to see also as civil society, as observers, a consensus on this particular issue, on this particular agenda, which I think can help parties to make their decision on this. Also, I think that the knowledge, traditional knowledge indicators that we are discussing specifically in the context of this meeting are excellent and provide opportunities for measuring more meaningfully our progress. But the indicators are not male or female, right? In a limited binary context. It is about how we collect data to include all genders and how we ensure that data is at least disaggregated by gender, age, status, and so on. So if we have a good, strong monitoring framework that with headlines and component complementary indicators for all targets, we need to make sure that disaggregated data around gender is there for all targets. And my last comment would be around the fact that there is still, what would I say, a separation or a division when we talk about data. In general, there are fantastic and great database. I mean, one example was provided by Mariella around tenure and tenure security, how people feel secure about their tenure, which is a very important component, I would say. But the issue is about what is considered a good scientific data, what is officially considered and looked at and counted, or maybe somehow, sometimes fulfill scientific standards, and what is not, and what is considered more informal, community-based, sometimes different ways to address it. And this is a concern. And this is a little bit coming back to the gender issue, is a little bit like the invisibility challenge that women still face. It's not that there are limited data or insufficient documentation of women's roles and contribution to biodiversity conservation and sustainable use, but it's more about what is counted and what is looked at, what is considered, and what is not. And so I'll end by saying that is fundamentally is a win-win situation if we want it to be so, because more diverse knowledge sources, more diverse data, more perspectives, intersectional perspective would only help evidence for appropriate and right policy making, decision making around biodiversity and nature. And I'll conclude here. Thank you. Hopefully not too long.
Thank you very much, Christina. As usual, keeping it short and sweet and to the point. Yeah, so we really appreciate your sentiment as well, and also the impression, what do you call it, the emphasis on interrogation of what exactly is meant and what exactly is collected, because this is the only way we can ensure that we have impact. Now, I do not want to take a lot more time on summarizing your presentation, your great presentation. I would like now to, first of all, acknowledge our online colleagues for being with us and also for taking time to listen to us. And now I would like to invite the minister. We want to hear how government is engaging, and I'm so sorry for ambushing you. But I would like to also let us hear from government about how they engage and how these structures can actually help us achieve more appropriate indicators for traditional knowledge with a gender lens. Thank you.
Obrigada pelo convite de fazer parte aqui da mesa. Sou Ceisa Pitaguari, indígena do Brasil, né? Só fazendo um resumo um pouco para entender a diversidade dos povos indígenas no Brasil, são catalogados pelo IBGE, que é o Instituto Brasileiro de Geografia e Estatística. Nós temos mais de 300 povos, 305 povos indígenas.
So briefly summary for you, according to the Institute of Statistics, the official institute that make the census in the country, we are officially 305 peoples in the country.
Desses 305 povos, mais de 200 línguas falantes.
So we have more than 200 languages that are spoken in the country, indigenous languages,
Mas a língua oficial no Brasil é o português.
but the official language is Portuguese.
Mas os povos mantêm o uso da língua materna. Em alguns municípios, territórios, é reconhecido pelo próprio município, mas não tem um reconhecimento do Estado brasileiro das línguas indígenas como línguas oficiais, como vemos em outros países.
So the indigenous languages are still spoken by the indigenous peoples, even though the official language is Portuguese. But in some municipalities, it is recognized, but not officially from the Brazilian state. So it depends on the context, each municipality will recognize it or not.
E com o retorno do governo social popular, do governo Lula, se cria, nesse ano de 2023, o Ministério dos Povos Indígenas.
So upon the return of a social and popular government, with the Lula government that came back to the country, it was created the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples.
Um ministério que vem atrasado 522 anos,
Which is a ministry that is a bit delayed. It's only 522 years delayed.
mas, como diz a nossa ministra Sônia Guajajara, é um ministério ancestral.
But as our ministry, Sonia Guajajara says, it is an ancestral ministry.
Ministério que vem com uma potência de conhecimentos tradicionais. A ministra, Sônia Guajajara, e as 3 secretarias são 3 mulheres escolhidas por ela, mulheres que têm liderança nos territórios, liderança dos seus povos.
So the ministry has 3 secretaries, women that were chosen by Sonia Guajajara, and it has the characteristic of being a powerful ministry because it's grounded in the traditional knowledge, because also these women, they are leadership in their territory, they are close to their community.
E como um ministério inovador na estrutura do governo brasileiro, tem a missão de defender e proteger os direitos dos povos indígenas do país.
So it is an innovative ministry in the structure of the country, and it has the mission of protect and guarantee the rights of the indigenous peoples in the country.
Consequentemente, se protege o direito dos povos indígenas, protege toda uma cultura, toda a tradição e toda a biodiversidade desses territórios indígenas.
So when we are talking about protecting the rights of indigenous peoples, we are by extent talking about protecting the rights in the territories, but also the rights of the culture. Sorry, we're talking about protecting the culture and protecting the traditional knowledge and protecting biodiversity as well.
O grande desafio é aliar esses conhecimentos tradicionais dos povos indígenas, dos territórios indígenas, para dentro do governo, sensibilizar o governo da importância que é proteger os territórios indígenas. Protegendo, assim, os territórios, as terras indígenas, se protege também as florestas e toda a biodiversidade ali existente.
So the great challenge is to integrate and incorporate, to integrate the traditional knowledge of those peoples into the government, and make it clear that the protection of the traditional knowledge and the indigenous people's rights means also protecting the forest and means also protecting the biodiversity.
Trazemos, então, para o cenário do país e um cenário mundial, a importância que é a governança indígena para dentro do governo, essa governança que os indígenas fazem no território de respeito toda a natureza, de respeito à biodiversidade, de respeito aos cultos, às culturas, para dentro do governo, sensibilizando assim uma forma de se enxergar os territórios indígenas como esses grandes protetores, grandes guardiões do clima, grandes guardiões do planeta.
I'm gonna try to remember everything because she said many important things. So, the idea here is that we need to sensibilize, so with the ministry to sensibilize the government of the importance of the indigenous governance. So the way that indigenous people govern the territories needs to be understood by the government because it's through this governance that indigenous peoples are being able to guarantee the protection of not only indigenous peoples' rights, the territories, but also to protect the biodiversity and to push forward and to put at the forefront the guardians of the climate and the guardians of the biodiversity.
Por fim, trazer a visibilidade do trabalho das mulheres indígenas de tão desenvolvido dentro dos territórios, trazer também à luz, mostrar o quanto as mulheres indígenas são guardiãs do conhecimento, guardiãs da tradicionalidade do povo. São pelas mulheres indígenas que vem todo o saber, todo o ensino da cultura dos povos indígenas. Então, a criança ela tem o contato primeiramente com a mãe.
Okay, so the last thing that she wants to say is that the idea of the ministry is also to make visible, to give visibility of the importance of indigenous women. The work that they already do in the territories, it needs to be made visible because they are the first guardians. Você falou que elas são as primeiras guardiãs.
Do conhecimento da tradicionalidade da cultura.
Yes, they are the first guardians of the knowledge of the culture and of traditionality as well. So they want very much to make it visible the work of women because the first contact of a child is a mother.
E como é difícil a participação das mulheres em geral, você imagina com as mulheres indígenas. Então temos a missão de também potencializar a luta das mulheres indígenas, potencializar o trabalho desenvolvido por elas, e o nosso ministério tem essa missão de trazer esse conhecimento, trazer a importância do movimento indígena de mulheres. Por isso, nós realizamos no Brasil a Marcha das Mulheres Indígenas.
So make the indigenous women visible. She's speaking specifically about the work of indigenous women. If you can imagine that women's participation is difficult, can you imagine it's even more difficult than the participation of indigenous women. So one of the missions of the ministry is to make this work visible, and that's why there is a march of indigenous women in the country.
E a importância de se visibilizar a luta dessas guerreiras da ancestralidade, como nós chamamos no Brasil. Entendemos que as mulheres indígenas têm um trato de entendimento das questões dentro do território, e isso traz o ensinamento de paciência, de trabalho e de resistência, acima de tudo. Obrigada.
Yeah, so putting visibility in the work of indigenous women means to pay attention to the fact that they know what is going on in the territory, and they are the warriors, or they are the guardians of ancestrality.
O trabalho, o trato das mulheres.
Yeah, indigenous women, they know how to do things in the territory. They have a knowledge that is practical, but they have this knowledge that is important for keeping culture.
Thank you very much. I will not attempt to summarize the minister's words. You have heard them. It was great to hear from the horse's mouth. I am now also calling governments to support and take initiatives like this. It's also good to know that we have other countries from whom we can learn. For now, I want to mention that there are colleagues online. Sorry, Minister, if you would kindly please stay for a while in case any one of the people in the audience have a question. I prefer that you take it from there. And if colleagues, there's another government representatives who runs a similar department or section of society, I would also invite you to join us. And on that note, I will move myself over to that mic kindly.
Sí, sí, sí.
Thank you. Good day. Thank you for my sisters here on the table and over there for this very interesting discussion here about the indicators. I think from the beginning of the negotiations, I really believe that the indicators is the most important part of the GBF because it's the way to visualize and report the effective participation of the women in this case in the compliance of the goals and targets. So I really appreciate your work in these efforts, and I think it's very important to have these proposal of indicators ready to be discussed in the Subscript 26 and also ready to be discussed at the national level, because at the national level we really have a very important work to do on time in order to put the women up front and really give value to the efforts that they are doing or we are doing, but especially from Indigenous people and local communities doing for the conservation of and sustainable use of the biodiversity. And thank you for the models also, because from Colombia, we are very proud to have in the region and especially in the Amazon and an important representation from Indigenous in the government of the Brazil, from Brazil. And also because this is a very important message for all of us. It's an important message to take into account the traditional use of the territories, especially by women. And I am very proud to have the Minister Sonja Wajashara. We have her in Leticia in the first meeting of the Amazon and of course in the second meeting in Belém, trying to get together all the countries from the Amazon, trying to prioritize the most important things in our countries as a mega diverse country. So thank you so much for everything, and please count with Colombia and our government and also our communities and our Indigenous people and local communities in this effort.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
So
yes,
my-
it is.
Thank you very much. Please stay there. Kindly. In case questions are asked by the participants about engagement with the government, we really appreciate your presence here. So I would like to just mention that online, there are 3 colleagues who have made comments. One is Justice Fighter from the African Coalition on Green Growth, and he says that women's voices must be heard with the support of men who can give an ear to the issues affecting women in their communities, and asks that we journey together in this journey. So he says that he's from the Africa Coalition on Green Growth and a member of UNCBD Women Caucus. Pamela Jeru says that she supports women's voices and insists that they must be heard in all communities. She says that Indigenous culture has not been given the prominence doesn't give rights to women to be heard or participate in making decisions. Pamela is from Kenya. Bhavana Prabhari, who says, within their pastoralist community, women hold significant knowledge, yet their contributions frequently go unnoticed. Neglecting to acknowledge and document this wisdom and failing to pass it on to younger generation jeopardizes the preservation of our invaluable cultural heritage. Bhavana, thank you very much. It's from the Pastoral Women Alliance in India, Gujarat. So thank you very much, online participants. I don't know, now we have entered the Q&A session, and I want to ask who has a question for the panelists and the ministers in our midst. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry. Eda.
Thank you very much. I am Eda Fernandez. I am from Atrás, and I'm very happy to be also the Women Caucus. So I'm still having problems in understanding the link between providing information through the indicators or getting the information, and then who is going to use that information for what, and what is it, especially in the review of the implementation of the framework, because we don't want to get to 2030 with, oops, we haven't done anything, no? So this is a very special aspect of the framework. So I would like to ask Mariela, first a very silly question, but are you taking into account in agricultural households, forest households? Because the relevance of biomes, for example, the Amazon, is more about, thank God, still about forests, not of open agricultural land. So women are an indicator of land tenure, land use change, and water, for example, in forests or in forest ecosystem should be very important. Also, the official data you mentioned, me myself have been in the government, I was in the government for many years, and we did provide data, but we never provided data that make the government look back. So it's not that we told lies, but we choose what data to say, no? So are you considering obtaining data from other parts of the government? For example, if legal frameworks for land tenure are so important, should we contact Congress, for example? Because it's Congress that approve the legal frameworks, at least in Mexico. For example, academic organizations, the International Law Institute for the Environment, I don't know, something like that, they are collecting data for their own work. And those are things.
Thank you very much, Edgar. I think one of the panelists could take the question, one or two. I want to ask if there's another question from the colleagues. And I want to also acknowledge that now we have 30 people online, which is great. The gentleman at the back, kindly.
Yeah, thank you so much for why am I participating in this? Because I work with you in Uganda. I appreciate all the presenters because whatever they are talking about is actual at the grassroots. They are not from Uganda, but whatever they are talking about, they are actual things. When we talk about improving traditional knowledge, how will women get the knowledge when they are not participating? Someone that calls including men in whatever they are doing. Why? Because of the traditional activities in our country, many women participate. You can organize meetings, education, you don't come. What am I going to say? In all the strategies that we are trying to put into existence, should think about is joint, considering the actually are training women, also training men to learn how they can allow the women to participate. Yes, because if they don't participate, how will they get it? How will they go there with their Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also for that great intervention. And it's also great to see that we have supporters from our male colleagues. Thank you very much. Any other question? Before I pass the baton back to the presenters.
I have a question.
Maybe,
Should I go ahead?
I think we start with you. Thank you.
My sisters from Latin America. I'm so glad Colombia has ratified Escazú agreement, and I know Brazil is going to ratify because your minister said it. But let me tell you, Escazú is so powerful for the people. My country ratified, and I feel that boldness. When I see things not going right, I open my mouth because I know that agreement protects me. And my desire now is to work with other countries in the Caribbean that haven't ratified. I get emails from the groups. Can you tell us about Escazú? Can you come and help us? And I'm making plans January to go to Dominica. For the minister, he said, every time I see you, I see Escazú. All you talk about is Escazú. I say I'm a local community, and that's where the power comes from because it gives me a voice in decision making. So I just want to encourage you to include, embrace all those people in your country. Their knowledge is important, and they're vital source of as a human resource to governments because they have knowledge. And they will help us to work together to reach all these targets, climate, chemicals, waste. We need everybody on board. Thank you so much for coming with us today.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Also for that passionate intervention and appeal. I also have another question from Valentina Figuera from Global Forest Coalition. First of all, she thanks all of you for sharing with us and asks how can these 8J meetings outcomes support the demand for having headline indicators for all targets and face the invisibility challenge that women are constantly grappling with. With that, I would like to ask the panelists to start. Maybe I can start from Mariela to answer Edna's question or any other question, and you can also have the other presenters come in. Thank you.
Thanks, Cecilia. Gracias por las preguntas. I think they are very crucial to why we're meeting here and to better understand the kind of data we work with. I try to address both questions at the same time because I think both of them have at the basis the same question. And I think we need to distinguish between the two kinds of data. The three indicators I presented at the beginning, which is just quickly go back to. These are SDG indicators. So the one for land tenures and the two ones zooming in more into the women perspectives and their rights to land. These indicators have a precise methodology that has been recognized within the SDG framework and requires specific data, which is not very flexible at this point. So it does not take into account forestry. And in many cases, it only accepts data from official sources. So census data, statistical offices, or household surveys in some cases. So these are the limitations, which I tried to highlight in the overarching challenges with these indicators that do exist. But on the bright side, and this is where I tried to complement with these additional sources of data. This is the second kind of data I think we need to take into account. These are data that are way more engaging with the parts and the groups in the population that we're trying to get more involved in these processes to reflect the realities that they face, the challenges that they have that go beyond official data. and here can speak especially on the case of Landex, which is ILC's tool, and sort of reflects the whole philosophy of ILC, is to put people really at the center of data collection. The work that this tool works across the 10 commitments is that we try to analyze each commitment in 3 layers. So one is the legal framework. So how is the legal framework addressing Indigenous people? How is the legal framework addressing the situation of local communities, of women, of defenders, and so on? And then the implementation of that legal framework and the outcomes of the implementation. So concrete results. And for in total, we have 33 indicators that try to cover this. And for these, we try, for the majority of our indicators, are people-based indicators, meaning that these are questions that, together with our national land coalitions and the members identified to implement the tool, we go out in the field. We try to connect with local communities, with Indigenous people, to directly get their input to the questions that we're asking for, and to investigate this data. So this data goes beyond just numbers. It focuses way also much on the qualitative aspect of this, in order to try to get more information that is more than official frameworks report to, such as the SDGs. And we are trying with the, let's say, collaboration of, let's say, more international, stronger representative institutions, such as FAO or the IFAD, FIDA, to put this data forward, to show that there is a way, that there is data, there are tools that already work, function. Pre-index is also one of them. Landmark is another one that puts Indigenous people at the center of their data collection, to show that there is data. We're not missing data, we just don't know how to use it. So these are spaces where we try to focalize, to put in this complementary data, additional data, and try to fit it into these official frameworks that we see have challenges, have limitations, and do not reflect or do not include at all populations such as IP or even the gender disaggregation in many of their indicators. So yes, I hope this covered the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mariela. I also have a question of my own for our government representatives. My issue would be, how do we better engage with government to get the outcomes that we desire, in the sense of getting to the point where we actually have like a ministry of Indigenous peoples that actually has women embedded within it. Maybe Yesenia, we can maybe ask the responses to come from the government in case they need to run, but also they can also address other questions if there. Thank you. No, the question. Yeah, but you translate. Sí, sí, no, yo translate la pregunta.
Sí, sí, sí.
Vale ressaltar que o Ministério dos Povos Indígenas, ele nasce dessa força do movimento indígena.
So the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples, it was born from the strength of the indigenous movement.
Não é que o presidente dormiu e acordou e disse, vou construir o Ministério dos Povos Indígenas. É uma construção bem antiga do movimento participativo organizado.
So it's not because the president, can you hear me? Yeah. It's not because the president woke up and he was in a good mood and decided to create the ministry, because it's a long process of struggle from the indigenous movement organized.
Claro que ressaltando a importância de o presidente criar um ministério, firmar ali ministério para os povos indígenas tão importante quanto os outros ministérios, mas especificamente da pergunta como a sociedade civil tem participação, o movimento indígena no Brasil, ele realiza uma grande assembleia chamada Acampamento Terra Livre.
So of course, we need to recognize the effort of the president of creating a ministry that has the same level of importance of other ministries, but specifically replying to the question of how civil society responds to how civil society works in Brazil. So we have from the Indigenous movement an important meeting that is called the Free Land Campment.
Então, partindo da premissa de que todos os assuntos devem ser debatidos em conjunto com a participação de todos os povos indígenas, todas as decisões saem dessas grandes assembleias.
So in these big assemblies, in this meeting, the main premise is that all decisions are taken together with all the indigenous peoples, with all the peoples that are participating. So all the decisions are taken together in the meeting, in the assembly, in the big assembly.
Então, o movimento social indígena, ele contribui com essa mudança de paradigma de que se constrói com o movimento e muda-se as estruturas do governo de escuta realmente, de escutar o que os povos indígenas pensam sobre a gestão do seu território ou sobre a construção do seu território, a partir do olhar dos povos indígenas.
So the indigenous movement, it proposes structural changes, and the proposal here is that the government has the possibility of hearing how is indigenous governance, so how indigenous peoples govern their territories, and those decisions that are being brought up by the indigenous movements are being heard by the government.
Por isso é importante fortalecer as instâncias de participação social.
So that's why it's so important to strengthen the processes of social participation.
Então, o Ministério ele conta com 2 instâncias de participação social.
So there are 2 processes of social participation within the ministry.
Conselho Nacional de Política Indigenista.
So there is the National Council of Indigenous Policy,
que tem representação de todos os estados da federação, 27 representações indígenas.
So that has 27 representations from each state in the country, but 27 representations from indigenous peoples.
E 27 representações do governo.
And 27 representations from the government, from government states.
E a presidência desse conselho é exercida pelo Ministério dos Povos Indígenas.
And the presidency of this council comes from the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples.
Entendemos que a partir do conselho, com a participação dos povos indígenas debatendo com o governo, se propõem políticas que possam ser executadas dentro do território a partir da ótica dos povos indígenas.
So it's from the viewpoints of indigenous peoples that are represented in this council that public policies are created in the ministry.
Então, nesse sentido, apontado casos reais específicos que o governo possa se debruçar para resolver e não ter uma ideia só do governo e se aplicar dentro do território.
And the idea is to look to specific cases in which the council debates and give propositions to the government, and not the other way around, where the government has an idea and wants to implement top down.
Um exemplo é a Política Nacional de Gestão Ambiental e Territorial Indígena.
So, for instance, there is an example of the national policy of environmental and territorial management. Can you say it? That's right? Yeah, okay.
O território, como chamamos no Brasil, regularizado, homologado, ele precisa de uma gestão, e essa gestão ela deve ser feita por aquele povo que vive naquele território. E essa gestão a gente chama de gestão ambiental e territorial.
So the environmental and territorial management of a territory means when a territory is recognized and demarcated in the country, the territorial management of this country needs to be done by the people that live in this territory.
Para isso é preciso ser elaborado um protocolo de propostas, e isso é coletado junto àquele território, que nós chamamos de plano de gestão. Então, os povos, em reuniões, em seminários, em assembleias, apontam quais as atividades que devem ser desenvolvidas dentro do território.
So there is a protocol for that, and which is called the territorial planning document that is created with the people that lives in this territory, that together in different meetings and different encounters think of the ways in which the territory needs to be managed.
Isso é elaborado um livro em que você elenca atividades desde o seu município, passa pelo estado e pelo governo federal. Então, orçamento para dentro do território das atividades elencadas pelos povos.
And then they create a book with all the activities that needs to be done, and that goes from the territory to the municipality and to the federal government. And budget needs to come to those activities that were listed to become real.
E por isso entendemos que essa é uma forma de escuta que os governos devem ter com os povos indígenas. Vai ao território e escuta, faz a escuta qualificada, sistematiza e quantifica para se executar um plano de gestão desses. A gente tem um valor fora da Amazônia e um valor dentro da Amazônia.
So that's the way we are talking about the way that the government has to hear, right? We create a protocol for gathering all the activities, and the government hear what is needed in the territory, and then there is a budget that is for it within the Amazon and for the outside of the Amazon.
Essas atividades vai desde proteção da floresta, cursos d'água, como recuperação de áreas degradadas.
And those activities goes from the protection of the forest, recuperation of water streams, and
Recuperação de áreas degradadas.
and recuperation of degraded areas.
Achamos que isso é um bom exemplo para outros países também tomarem como atividade com seus povos indígenas.
So that's, for instance, one example that we think other governments can take to have a closer participation, to have a closer or work with the indigenous peoples in their countries.
Excellent to hear this framework and also that it works. I hear the words legal, I hear the words planning, I also hear budgeting and allocation of money according to Indigenous people's needs. And amongst those needs will be ours. So thank you very much, Melissa, and also for being a gender champion. I want to take this a round of applause for her again. Our next champion from Colombia takes the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for your words also. I don't want to be so long, but I just want to recall that in Colombia we have also a very ancient movement for indigenous peoples, and actually they include in our new constituency in 1991. And from that time, we are having them in the Congress and in the different positions at the public institutions. And in the last days, we are working with them for the National Development Plan, which is the plan for each government. Each 4 years, we have like some kind of consulting with them about the main subject to include in the National Development Plan. And actually, we have a permanent roundtable with indigenous people where is the place that we follow the different commitments between the indigenous peoples and the government. So we have another informal also scenarios to discuss with them and introduce their interest in our public politics, and especially going to the women and the monitoring framework. I just want to emphasize that in Colombia we are very interested in develop the community monitoring, and especially with women. So we hope to see the women taking the information for the monitoring and use that information for their interest, and also for the report of the CBD commitment. But of course, the main utilization of this information is for women, and to improve their activities in their normal life. And the other thing that I want to share with you is our ministers from the region in the last meeting in Panama, like 3 weeks ago. Our minister agreed in the forum of the ministers agreed to support the fund for Indigenous women. So it's very important for all of us to take this into account, because of course finance is a very key issue to guarantee not only the livelihoods but also to achieve the commitments in the global biodiversity framework. So we are very in a supportive way of this kind of fund for women, for Indigenous women. So thank you so much.
We are indeed privileged. Thank you very much for your patience as well, and we really appreciate you. We hope to interact with you more, and maybe even call you during our online engagements to learn better and much more from you. Thank you very much, colleagues. I would also just like to request the panelists who have remained to just give us a word. Thank you, I understand. Round of applause as she leaves the floor. And for those panelists who are remaining, I think we have about 3 minutes each to take the questions. I don't know what should start with, Christina. Yes.
Christina is going to be 1 minute because I just want to thank and appreciate the speakers from parties, from civil society, from grassroots, whoever. It felt really like some people sometimes ask, what is whole of society? I think this was a good example. We may not be many, but diverse voices and engaging in dialogues and discussion to learn more and to understand more about each other. And this is for a common cause. Thank you for this panel.
Thank you very much, Yesenia. And continue, my sister.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for being here. Just with regard to the brother that sent the question from brother of Uganda. This is a thing to think of. This is an issue to think about. To be very careful and to use culturally appropriate ways to work with women in the local communities and indigenous peoples, because sometimes we want to promote change or fast change and being very disruptive. However, as we don't know the context, it's complicated and sometimes we could create some problems. When he talks about the workshops, we can find the culturally appropriate ways to engage. For instance, sometimes women are going to workshops developed by women or about a woman, by a woman. And the second point is to work to work with men, with the men too, because the men needs to be to have access to the capacity building, to awareness, etc. And the last points are how we are the most direct and dependent of nature, most direct. We are most direct in contact, And this is why, because we need to monitor, and we need to monitor to know the effectiveness of this global biodiversity framework. And be careful with not increasing the gender roles, to put in all the responsibility in women, or in women and girls to take care of nature, because sometimes it has happening, and women are are key for reporting and for monitoring data at all the levels. And those data needs to address and to reflect the women contribution. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Yesenia. Thank you also for the advice. And also great to lay emphasis on what must be measured. Maybe now from the last speaker, Ruth
I'll be
Spencer.
quick. The way forward is by building partnerships and collaborations, not just with CSOs, but with the government. Quick example, UNEA 6 is coming up next year. And I want to do a side event, but I wanted to show partnerships with governments. I work with 3 Caribbean governments, and I've already heard from 2 positive. So, we should not be afraid to approach governments. They're all partners. We have to work together. So the future looks good, and we got to make it work for the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we end, I would like to mention that we have to now go on and make sure that we have a gender responsive GBF, and we have to make sure that the conditions are such that we can be able to create an environment where every one of us is taken into account and not left behind. If indicative actions 3.1 and 3.2, 3.11 and 3.2 that emphasize the importance of the systematic collection of gender-disaggregated biodiversity data and the development of gender-specific indicators for comprehensive understanding of gender impacts is one to watch. Please work with us this journey as you have always done. We really appreciate you. And thank you for attending. And for online participants, we also appreciate you for taking time to listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you to all the presenters.